Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Kim.
And this is our story for His glory. This story is about the healing that our marriage has experienced. We have been married now for 16 years, and as part of our journey, we've had some bumps in the road. The first 11 years of our marriage was a very interesting time. We were very young when we got married, 23 years old. And that came with some amazing opportunities to start at a very young age.
In our marriage, we went through a lot of stuff. We moved quite a few times. I got a degree, you changed careers. We moved from Edmonton to Calgary. After my schooling was done, we decided to have our son, Ryan. And we were expecting him, and then things were great. A new baby came and arrived, and after that moment, things were another big adjustment for us as a couple with a newborn. And then we wanted to expand our family, and that's really when we encountered some difficulties for the first, significant difficulties for the first time in our marriage. I think Ryan was only 9 months old when it was a surprise pregnancy, and it turned out that we were miscarrying. And then at that point, I think we were both disappointed and realized that we wanted another one maybe sooner than later. So we started to actively try, and in that time had 2 more miscarriages, so 3 miscarriages in total, which was very, very trying on our relationship. And we really didn't do a great job of communicating it through that. I think it affected my heart and destroyed who I was a lot more than I would ever have communicated that to Rob. And I don't even think we quite even realized that it was destroying us as much as it was. Yeah, and there was no really rhyme or reason for it, so there wasn't anything that we could fix or change for those miscarriages. And then we did get pregnant with Addie after that.
And all the while, there's also career advancements and aspirations during this time for me, especially because that was always my outlet where I would go, and it was very easy to become caught up in the idea of being somebody, making something of yourself. And as a man, we wanted to keep Kim at home so she could be a stay-at-home mom. But with me, the pressure was I felt it was really on to make a living for the family, and as part of that pressure, I think I really bought into lies about who I was and my identity. And I think slowly but surely my identity seemed to be really intertwined with my work. That was kind of the time in my life where I felt very alone and ill-equipped to help Kim, who was obviously going through a lot.
And for me, I think I felt alone in the home. So my life became consumed with being a mom and a wife in the fact of making meals and cleaning the house, and it was definitely not being a helpmate in any way. It was just doing the basic chores. So I think I started to lose myself. And then at the same time still grieving those 3 miscarriages. So, and not really talking to anyone or getting the help. So all of this stuff is building up.
Yeah, I became consumed in friendships and hanging out and carrying on. A lot of times going to bars and drinking and having a good old time. It wasn't just about having fun, it was also about medicating or self-medicating. It really became a bit of an outlet and a way to escape kind of what was going on at home. From the outside looking in, everything was great. 3 beautiful kids that came. Jackson was the completion of the 3, of course. And
then I think a real pivotal point was I just couldn't do it anymore the way we were doing it. I felt like we weren't communicating well anymore, and I knew that things needed to change. So I had asked Rob if he would do counseling with me. Really, he wasn't very into it. He actually was quite angry that I would even suggest that we would do that, because he figured he would look like the bad guy, and it wasn't about us fixing our relationship. So at that point, I really shut down in our relationship. I thought, what am I going to do? He doesn't want to get help. He doesn't want to fix things. So if he's not going to fix things, then how do we even function in this relationship anymore? So then really for the next 2 years, I was looking for ways out, I guess. I was looking to see who the man, who you really were. If he was an abuser, or if it was just something that was in my head, or, you know, like I think I needed reasons to leave. And of course, when you're looking for them, you can find lots of reasons. I actually was far happier at this point when Rob was out of the home as opposed to inside the home. So I felt like I walked on eggshells a lot of the time, worried about his reaction to certain things. I very much didn't feel valued or supported, or just generally, like, you know, nurtured, I guess, is kind of the thing. And a lot of times it's funny because grown men are still wanting to be nurtured in some way. And I think that nurturing comes from, you know, I think really just diving in and letting Jesus take a lot of our baggage or stuff that we brought into marriages, or you know, so that was kind of the thing, is that it was probably an unhealthy thing, and without feeling nurtured, it was a very selfish time in my life, because I kind of felt like there wasn't anybody that loved me or understood me. In fact, there was a point in time not long after this period in history that I was absolutely convinced that there wasn't one person on the face of the earth that loved me truly for who I was. So, you know, I was trying to deal with my own pain and my own hurt without really trying to be the husband and the man that she needed me to be. And I think now, if I look back at that time, I was depressed. I didn't feel loved and supported, and I felt battered and used, and I didn't feel a lot of self-worth. Yeah, it was hard just to get 3 meals on the table for the kids and make sure that their basic needs were met. And then I came to the end of it, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be that person in the relationship anymore. I couldn't be that mom to those kids anymore, and because God wasn't part of it, the only thing I knew to do was to leave. So I packed up the 3 kids. I left you a note saying we were gone and we've been accepted it, and we moved to my parents' house. Yeah, in September 2010, I came home one day, and Kim had already, by this time, announced that she intended to leave, and there was nothing I could do about it. And that was a very sincere statement, because I just think that she had had enough, and it just wasn't working. It wasn't a healthy thing. And so, you know, I panicked. So I tried everything I could in my power that I could think of in a very short period of time to be able to try to change Kim's mind. Or I don't think anybody really overtly sets out to control their spouse, but when something big like this happens, it was like, man, like, how do I do this? How do I fix this? And I tried desperately. I got to this level when Kim was on her way out and then finally left. It was totally and utterly devastating. I would come home to this very home, and it was just empty and void. And there was just me. And feelings of shame and guilt and regret. It prompted me to start asking questions about who I am and who does God want me to be. Yeah, and my life was slightly different. So I felt liberated because I had left. I felt, started to feel some self-worth. There was a guy, a friend of mine that came into my life at this time too, who I knew from when I was 18 years old. And in the matter of having one coffee with him, he made me feel loved and cherished and respected and all the things that I hadn't been feeling. while we were separated, there was definitely an emotional affair with this guy who, made me feel value that I hadn't felt in so long. And then also at the same time that I left, I had applied to go into nursing and was accepted. So my life was looking great. I was independent and I was doing this degree and was feeling all the things I wasn't feeling, the love and support and stuff.
One of the things that really started to change my life is I was speaking to an old friend, a dear friend, that asked me where I was at with my walk with God, and he asked me if I was in a situation where I was in a healthy church family, and he just encouraged me. He says, Rob, if I'm not going to be at this church for a while because I'm away, but if you would consider wanting to mix things up a little bit, kind of get a fresh perspective, just come to my church. And I didn't want to, because that church had things where people would raise their hands, and there might even be people that speak in tongues, or just really very more of a charismatic feel than I felt accustomed to. And yet I remember one Sunday just getting up and I had to go. I don't know why I went. I was kicking and screaming internally the entire way to go, like a child having a tantrum. And I just remember somebody wrapping their arms around me and saying, I love you, and they wouldn't let go. And at that particular moment in time was probably where I became utterly convinced of my Heavenly Father's love for me. I also became convinced that other people here on earth love me for who I am, despite my faults, despite my shortcomings. And that was such a liberating moment. It was not something that cleared things up overnight very easily, but that was a seed that was planted in me, in my heart, that has just started to grow. Now I had a church family at Life Connection Church. I spent a lot of time with many people that were really committed to understanding my pain and my hurt, my upset. Which is really strange when you think about it, because these people really didn't know me all that well, but they were just so given to helping me go through whatever I had to go through. And what I was really especially taken back by is that these people had such a heart for family, and they would profess that God has such a heart for families as well. He designed families this way for a reason, the mom and a dad and the children. These people that were really speaking into my life, Pastor Peter and others, they obviously know who I am, just really invested a ton of time in me and helping me kind of work through some of the stuff, to counsel me, to console me, to encourage me. But one of the biggest things that I got out of that moment in my life was to fight for my family, to stand for my family, to stand for my wife and children, which is kind of an odd concept, because at this particular point in time, things had already gone legal. Lawyers and mediation attempts and arbitration and separation agreements, and
you were driving me crazy.
Yes, I was. So.
I wanted nothing more than to be divorced, so I had hired a lawyer, served Rob with papers. We were trying to get separation agreements done, and things were postponed and delayed, and nothing ever came to fruition other than many legal bills. It was 3 years of going back and forth and never ever coming to any agreement.
And during this time, it was quite early into this process, maybe 6 months after we'd separated. I was just sitting on one of our couches here, and God said there won't be pen put to paper for these agreements. And I didn't know what that meant, and I kind of just said, God, I don't understand what that means. And then I feel like He was saying like this: there will not be a signed agreement. not a separation agreement, not a divorce decree. I will save your marriage. I heard that so clearly. And I said, God, you don't understand, man. Like, I have to go to court in like a week or two or whatever it was. There is no hope. I've been told, 17 different ways that we are done. We are over. Kim is done. That was the expression. She was done. And there's nothing that I could do to change that. That was the moment in time where I just said, God, okay, I trust you. And I'm going to put everything into just being able to, listen for your will in all of this. That you give me eyes and ears to hear. And that's why I think I had a real resolve to be able to walk in, just in the integrity of our family, even though it didn't look like the family that I had wanted. I wasn't going to give up. There's times where I was severely disheartened, but what ended up happening is that I had a lot of people in my life that were encouraging me, get up. That was kind of the thing that I heard one person say to me, like, just get up. And I had also all kinds of encounters with Jesus like that, because it was like, yeah, you may be down and this may not look good, and you may be destined for court, but I got this. And then finally, I think just something clicked. Maybe, and this is probably 2.5 years after we separated. I said, God, I trust you. I know you got this. And this time I felt it in my heart, probably for the first time. I really desperately wanted to see it in my heart before that, but then it just didn't really materialize. And during all this time, I was just praying fervently for our family to be healed and restored. And I was always panicky, like, what if it doesn't happen? Because it's been 2.5 years. What if it doesn't happen? And I just got to the point where we were, nearing an appointment where we could have finalized a separation agreement, which meant that our assets would have been divided, our custody arrangements for the children would have been settled. It basically would have been like a divorce without the paper saying that you're divorced. During this time, I did see a vision of our family back together in a very specific place. Near a place in the shoe swap in BC. And combined with that, with the word of feeling like God's going to heal our marriage, there's different other encounters that came along the way. It just seemed like we were doomed to succeed in this. Even though it seemed from circumstances looking at it, it was probably hopeless. And I had a lot of well-meaning and loving family members and friends tell me to be a man, stand up and be a man, and just get it done.
I was still done. I had graduated from nursing now at this point. I had a job. We were about to sign documents, so I was excited because I would get money and I could buy my own place. And yeah, things looked like they were finally going to be resolved in that way for me. And then I had a wedding for a YWAM friend of mine in Montana. And just watching these two people who love the Lord so much get married, and I remember thinking, oh, I wish I had that. And then I reminded myself how good my life was, and I really don't need to have that to have a good life. And that's really where God started to work in my heart, was just that little snippet there. And then I had a conversation with a different friend, and I was trying to convince her that divorce was good, and it was good for me, and it was a good space that I was in. And she just looked at me and she asked if I had ever truly forgiven Rob. And in my mind, of course I had. I wasn't a bitter person. I wasn't angry at him, like outwardly anymore. So my answer to her was, yes, of course I had forgiven him. And then her second question was, have you ever asked God what he wanted for you? Does he want you to get a divorce? And I looked at her and I said, I can't go back. I can't go back to what we had. And she said, but God would never ask you to go back to that. So it wasn't changing in that moment, but I had a 5-hour drive back to Calgary and just contemplating that. And then God showed me stuff like how much pride I had in my heart, and how do you go back to someone that you've walked away from, and how do I trust that he's changed, and how can it be different? And God did so much in my heart in that 5 hours. I didn't actually even know it at the time, but I think I realized it the first time I saw Rob after that. I think our kids had a soccer game, and I remember looking at him, and I saw him in a totally different light. I saw him from eyes who had forgiven. I could remember things that happened, but I didn't have any of the bad feelings anymore. I didn't have any anger towards him. I didn't have any sadness. I didn't have any of that clouding my judgment. And I could see the man that he had become. I had seen that he was now this man of God. And that's really when it started. And it was small increments, I would guess, initially.
Yeah, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know any of this was going on, but...
So I actually started texting him and asking him all the same questions I had been asking him the whole time. And it was the first time that he had given me real honest answers as to who he was and why he did what he did. And one question that I asked him, and it changed my heart forever, I think too, was, why did you keep fighting? Why did you keep fighting through all of these years? And he said, it was a true love for you.
Well, you probably within a couple of days would have signed everything off, and then Kim said, no, I don't know where this is going, but I noticed that there's been a change in you. And wow, I didn't even know what to say, because it was kind of like really what God had said is coming true, where there will not be a pen put to the paper, that the agreements will not be signed. And I thought, can this be? Well, I'm not gonna, get too much into it. Just gonna let God take it where he needs to.
We still had a separation agreement in place, just a verbal one between the two of us. So Rob still was gonna take the kids for the first month of July, and I was gonna have them for August. And it's still at this point where we were just texting each other, and so he took them. And while you were gone, I don't even know, we probably spent I don't even know how many texts we did a day, but it was almost all day.
Hundreds. Yeah.
So it was cool to be part of their life, even though I wasn't able to be there. And at that point too, we had stopped child support payments. We weren't sure where it was going, but I think we both knew in our hearts that it wasn't necessary anymore. And then you drove the kids to BC, where I was, and originally Rob was just going to stay for one night, just as a transition, and it turned into 5 nights. And it was really the first time that we spent as a family again.
Mm-hmm. And during this time, the kids were, so what's going on? Mom, do you and Dad like each other now, or? And so they were kind of a little bit uncertain about it and a little guarded, but very happy at the same time.
We could see that things had changed between the two of us.
And it was at that time when I had originally had a vision on the beach with basically a very unique picture in my mind that it was kind of part of our family being healed. And it's funny because when I was on that trip, I just decided to go down to the water just for a little walk, and I saw that. It wasn't like a deja vu weird thing. It was like I knew without a doubt that God was saying that his promises hold true.
I would say that my relationship with God was still in new phases again, because he really hadn't been part of my life in the last, I don't even know, for sure the 3 years we were separated. But I found myself praying about us and if it was meant to be. And it's funny how God can use just the simplest things. So I love dragonflies, and there was a dragonfly flying around, and I said, God, you know what? If this is you, And if this is what your heart is, could this dragonfly just land close enough that I could take a picture? And it landed on my knee. You know, like, so not only did God do that, it was, he took it one step farther.
So we were just enjoying each other's company and getting back into the swing of things. The new swing of things, yes. For me, it was just really, like, it was amazing bouncing down the sidewalk to come back home, because, you know, it was amazing. Like, everybody was excited that I was home. Kim would be excited, the kids were excited. It was just like a complete restoration. A lot of those things that were heavy, big, life-changing events that could have been kind of stored up and harbored as hurt, they really honestly disappeared. We still wanted to be cautious about how we came back together, especially considering our children. We don't want to be one moment all, yeah, we're back together, and the next minute, no. So we did seek, you know, Christian counseling. But it's amazing throughout that whole process, and even I think the counselor would even say, like, you guys are doing amazing. I'm kind of surprised. God just took all the hurt away.
Because to put it into perspective, I think it was a 4-month period from when God changed my heart to when we were living back together again.
There are so many people celebrating with our friends at Life Connection, especially. They were just absolutely overjoyed, and they just knew that God did this, and they just wanted to give God glory for that, because they were praying and holding our family up in prayer.
So we've been back together for 3 years now. We'll celebrate our 17th wedding anniversary in August. And, you know, there's been so many amazing things, and there's been so many hard things too. Mm-hmm. We're now a family that's completely rooted in God and prayer, and, you know, when I'm having a tough day, Rob is there by my side to pray with me or for me if I can't.
Yeah, it's been a journey for our kids as well. There's been difficult conversations that I used to have with Ryan, our now 10-year-old. He could see and could picture and pick up on things, and Dad, Mom's never coming back, and it's never gonna happen, Dad. And I'd say, well, son, we're just gonna trust God for this family, and I don't really know what else to do. Let's just pray real quick. And we pray that God would have his hand on our family, and then these are the type of stories that we have. A legacy. If there's nothing else that we've done in life, if we accomplish nothing else, I think we've established a legacy that there is hope, that God is hope, and to never give up. When God gives you a word, you gotta see it through, because it will happen.
17 years ago, when Rob and I got married, we had chosen a verse, and we didn't want the typical verse, so we chose Colossians 3, verse 12 and 14. And it just says, since God chose you as his holy people whom he loves, clothe yourselves in tender-hearted mercy, kindness, compassion, humility, and patience. Make allowances for each other's faults, and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember that since the Lord forgave you, you must also forgive others. But above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds all things together in perfect unity.